So I do not have any financial disclosures to any of the products. Basically, good outcome is a combination of a good product, an excellent preoperative assessment and indication, which the ICL surgery definitely stands to, and a good surgical technique, which doesn't require in an ICL surgery a much technical skill, and a good post-operative evaluation. I think a combination of all the four is what boils down to an excellent refractive outcome. We all know that the refractive surgery spectrum has shifted from cornea-based to lenticular-based and then combined. So a lot of young refractive surgeons come
Some internet. Sonu?
They have
Sonu, we lost your voice.
Lost your voice.
on X refractive solution, whether a PRK based or a SMILE. There are certain caveats. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we
Can you hear me?
We can hear.
I'll just take a minute. Maybe my internet I'll need to shift. Am I audible?
Audible.
Okay. I think this one here has been keep yourself muted, unmuted. Are you audible? So thank you so much and sorry for the break. So there has been a drift constantly between the cornea-based and a lens-based surgery. And there are certain indications where we really need to have lens-based surgery as one of the forerunners of the refractive surgery. So phakic intraocular lenses have been used in the past, angle-supported lenses, where we were using the Ecrisoft and the Artisan lenses. And now gradually there has been a shift over a period of years to the iris claw lenses. And what is now in vogue is the posterior chamber lenses. So why posterior chamber concept is these lenses are basically both protecting the cornea from the damage, the endothelium, as they are far from the endothelium. They have an excellent cosmesis. They're close to the nodal point of the eye. They help in gaining of the retinal size image, and they have a greater optical zone at the corneal plane. They are sulcus located. Is my voice audible now, KP?
Yes, boss.
Audible.
Okay.
Audible.
Okay. So they are sulcus located. So they have a very stable location, and it allows for the toric design to remain stable in the sulcus. They are easy to remove and exchange. I think that is one great point with these lenses, that any point of time, whenever we are taking these patients for cataract surgery, the lens can be explanted, or whenever you have a surprise or a cataract formation, the lens can be exchanged. There are no fixation into the iris tissue, so it does not alter the shape or remove the tissue of the cornea. So in toto, they are very safe, and it's a reversible procedure. So that's why they stand to the test of time. There are certain off-label indications besides their refractive indications. And now we routinely use these, as we all do, post-penetrating keratoplasty, post-DALC, ICRs, after cross-linked corneas, and in patients with stable keratoconus. And specifically, I'm talking in those gamut of patients where you have kids and they have high anisometropias. I think this is one new area where they can be used, even as piggybacking in cases of pseudophakic refractive surprise. I think my friend Kamal has already spoken about an excellent preoperative assessment, patient selection, and lens calculation. Just I want to highlight 2 points. Any anterior chamber depth less than 2.8 is a strict no to any kind of an ICL surgery. I think this is one red line which all practicing surgeons should take into account. The second important is, since we are dealing with patients with high myopia, I have shifted my lower age limit from 18 to maybe 21 years of age. And thirdly, I always would do a good fundus examination. Mandatory is the OCT macula, because most of these patients might have an occult CNVM. And yes, of course, the peripheral retinal degenerations is again an important examination point before they are taken for any lens-based surgery. Contraindications have strictly been covered. And yes, any zonular abnormalities post-dilatation, we have to look after full dilatation whether in certain subset of these high myopic patients, you might have a surprise of zonal anomalies or lens subluxations. So the ocular examination, besides the complete ocular examination where we do in all our refractive workup, the two most important workup which determines the sizing in these ICLs is the anterior chamber depth and white to white. So long has been debate what is the accurate way to measure an anterior chamber depth and a white to white. I think what works best in your hands is the idle tool, and a good calibration after repeated examination, after repeated surgery, and maybe instrumental calibration is what is at the end of the day boils down into an accurate sizing. So in my armamentarium, I would use a pentacam. So anterior chamber depth for me would be synonymous with pentacam. Whatever the pentacam reading comes in, I would always chip in as the anterior chamber depth. Then you can have an ILMaster or an OpScan. The white to white, yes, a digital caliper under the microscope or under the slit lamp for the beginners. And that is one which stands. And at the same time, as Kamal said, you can always compare with any of the equipment which you have calibrated. Maybe in the best of the hands of Kamal, it is an autokeratometer, or you can have an ILMaster or an OpScan. But the instrumentation has to be properly calibrated and has to be repeatedly checked for any false readings. Sulcus to sulcus or the STS can be done under a UBM. The angle assessment gonioscopy is a must, and a specular count always preoperatively has to be taken. So what does sizing basically depends on two critical factors, the white to white and the anterior chamber depth. And what does sizing mean? Sizing basically boils down into a vault, and vault is basically the distance between the posterior surface of the ICL and the anterior surface of the human lens. So it is basically dependent upon these two factors. And when we talk about the anterior chamber depth, we are talking upon the distance from the endothelium. So the default settings of the device has to be properly checked, proper calibration. And if you have any discrepancy between the two eyes, that is an alarm for a recheck. The points have to be checked at multiple places, just not a single reading. When you are talking in terms of anterior chamber depth, the angle assessments, yes, the iridocorneal angles have to be assessed properly. This is one beautiful paper which shows the results of Bland-Altman analysis, and it talks about the inter-device differences of anterior chamber depth when we are talking of ILMaster vis-a-vis Pentacam, ILMaster vis-a-vis OpScan, and Pentacam and OpScan. And all these instruments show inter-observation deviation of almost 0.1 when compared. So for white to white, as I said, a digital caliper is what I would pitch in. And initially, inexperienced people can take it under the microscope after putting a speculum and a drop of an anesthetic, and a good reading can be taken, multiple readings. So white to white can also be measured using an ILMaster and an OpScan. And there are certain gray areas when you have a pterygium or you have a pigmented area around the cornea. So these are the patients where you can take multiple readings on different instruments. Discrepancies between two eyes or maybe between measuring devices should be taken care, and both the eyes usually should have similar white to white measurements. Now, if you see here, an OpScan shows a white to white of 12.7, and when you go to the iMatrix tool, actually the reading is 11.57. So white to white on an ILMaster usually overestimates, 700 overestimates by 0.3 millimeters, 500 would do an overestimation of 0.5, and a Pentacam usually overestimates 0.3 vis-a-vis an OpScan and a digital caliper. So the sizing of the ICL, an accurate sizing would mean vault of 250 to 750 microns, and undersized, we all know, can lead to subcapsular opacification. KP, am I audible?
Yes.
Audible.
I can see some distance. Okay, it's okay. An oversized ICL where the vault is more than 1000 volts may cause the pushing of the iris anteriorly and can cause a rise in the intraocular pressure and malfunctioning. So 2 slides which I share from my friend Kamal. How do you determine the vault size in implantable Coulomb lenses? There are certain factors other than the regular the anterior chamber depth and the white to white. I believe it's the preoperative anatomy and the lens parameters which again have some say in determining the vault size. There are certain factors like the angle to angle, the clear lens rise, the size of the ICL power, and the age. These are the 5 main factors which are predictor of the vault. So you have certain surprises. Most of the times it goes as you predict. But whenever you have surprise, there could be other factors apart from these two, the sizing issues. So the angle to angle, the clear lens rise, as Kamal had pointed out, what clear lens rise means, the size of the ICL power, and the age. These 5 factors at the end of the day determine where. This is a slide which I shared from Kamal, and thank you, Kamal. And this is how the clear lens rise. So if you see a nomogram here, whenever we have taken the anterior chamber depth and the white to white and the refractive power, this is being sent to the company, and the company would then give us a requisite power of the lens and the size of the ICL, and the variable sizes which are available with them would vary from 12.1, 12.6. But what needs to be seen here is, if you see a white to white of 11.14, a shift to 0.01 millimeter would shift your lens size one size bigger. Now, it is in these borderline cases where you can have surprises, where your vault might jump up or your vault might go down. So if you go one size up with an 11.145 millimeters, you can end up with a higher vault, or in cases where you have an 11.15 and you shift to one size lower, you can have a very low vault. So this comes only with your experience. And specifically in toric ICLs, I would always err on the one side sizing up. So now most of my patients, I don't go down, I go one size up. So I would prefer a little higher than a little lower vault, and specifically in toric ICLs, which would help me in keeping these lenses stable in their requisite position. Looking to the paucity of time, I would skip the video and would just thank you